Okay, let's get controversial. So if you ever wanted to see some of the most polarized opinions on the internet, just shout out into the proverbial void that you like one era of Final Fantasy over the other, and you are sure to be met with a swath, possibly an array of opinions that you never expected to see. A few days ago I made a video in defense of the turn-based and ATB turn-based style of Final Fantasy games, because I genuinely do enjoy those games, and I think they could and should still have a place in the modern day era of Final Fantasy. But I'm going to break the norm of internet opinions and hot takes, and actually have this thing called nuance. Oh, the pain, the horror! Not a binary option when it comes to a video game on the internet. Say it ain't so! Yeah, I actually like both eras of Final Fantasy. I know, once the shock and surprise has subsided from that flaming hot take, let me make an argument for the modern style of Final Fantasy. Because while it has many flaws, which I won't deny, I think it also has a lot of strengths as well. So straight up, I'm talking Final Fantasy XIV onwards. I haven't played the 13 series and wasn't a fan of 12, and I didn't play 11. And personally, I kind of view those games as a bit of a middle era for Final Fantasy. So let's talk Final Fantasy XIV, 15, 7 Remake, and what we know so far of Final Fantasy 16. Let's go in order here. Final Fantasy XIV. Yeah, it's an MMO. It also packs one of, if not the most engaging and emotionally gripping stories I've ever played or seen in a video game, and honestly, not just a video game. It has one of my favorite casts, my straight-up favorite antagonist of all time with Emmett Selk, multiple expansions whose stories I would rank in my favorite stories ever told, with Heavensward, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. Heck, you could even count the Stormblood patches if you want, with extremely poignant messaging, like the Garlemald section in Endwalker, in regards to brainwashing and propaganda, also the downfall of empires, or the character of Ilbert in the Heavensward patches concerning the desperation of people that they can feel under an imperialist regime, or you tackle the concept of despair itself in Endwalker in nuanced ways. They tackle very real human themes and worries and concerns and struggles while also tackling these metaphysical concepts. And it's this blend that creates a variety of tones and atmospheres in Final Fantasy XIV that, in my opinion, makes it so fun to just play through and to learn about and to hear these varied perspectives. The story can get dark, extremely dark, but also has bits of levity, which lets us care even more for the cast of characters. Heck, one of the most beloved scenes from Endwalker is when they all just sit down for a meal and some dude eats a hamburger. Outside of context, that makes no sense, but after spending so much time with these characters, moments like that don't feel slow-paced or at all. It feels like character development, and it feels like characterization, where the stories of these characters aren't just the overarching plot, right? It isn't just, oh, he hates the Empire, oh, he fights for the Empire, oh, she's the protagonist. It's not just like that. They're multi-dimensional. It seems like that when properly paced and well placed at that are able to flesh out the cast of characters like in Final Fantasy XIV to be so engrossing as they are. And the music is some of the best in the entire series, and I love the gameplay of Final Fantasy XIV as well. It's a take on the hotkey-based MMORPG done very interestingly. It's very rhythm-focused, and the fights are like this complicated dance you need to learn and to solve. It's just fun and engaging. It's an overall experience that I would criminally underrepresent within the confines of just a section in this video. But the game is truly one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had, and it's still ongoing. And look, I understand and I do get the argument that some people will use here, that we care so much about the characters that's a bit unfair to the other Final Fantasy games because of the sheer length of the story of Final Fantasy XIV. There's just more time for these characters to really spread their wings. And yeah, sure, being multiple hundreds of hours gives the game plenty of time to unravel the stories of these characters and develop them. But at the same time, it's a game that keeps my attention, if not made me even more engaged, over hundreds of hours and numerous full-length expansion stories on top of patches. That's a skill all of itself. Yeah, it's a long game, but it uses that length to its advantage. And from A Realm Reborn, when you first make your Warrior of Light, all the way to the end of 6.0 with Endwalker, that's one cohesive and engaging narrative, and the new storyline we are getting with these Endwalker patches immediately grabbed me, and made me care as well. It's not just a good story, it's expertly executed, that also pays respects to the games that came before it. Heck, the current story is very much based, or at least grounded in the aesthetics of Final Fantasy IV, but it doesn't feel beholden to these older stories and these older games. It references them, uses certain characters, but they feel like the Final Fantasy XIV variation of them. They feel unique and distinct, and it feels like its own separate storyline that can stand on its own 2 feet as one of the best stories out there. Now, let's go to the exact opposite of that with Final Fantasy XV, and yeah, this game is easily the most spiky when it comes to my enjoyment of it. There are times where the game just utterly enraptures me, and I love the game like few others. And there's just these other times where it was clear this game was rushed or something just went wrong. The pacing is all over the place. The overall plot feels woefully and tragically underdeveloped. Remember when they had to essentially remake Chapter 13 back when the game came out because it was so universally hated due to it being so slow and such a slog to play through? It is easily one of the worst plots in Final Fantasy in my opinion, that I've at least experienced, and the games that I've experienced, either played or watched other people play, are Final Fantasies 4, 6, 7, 10, 12, 14, 15, and 7 Remake. Having said that, on top of the combat, is also clunky and awkward to control, and the utilization of holding down the attack button to continue combos just in different directions makes the mechanics feel oddly unsatisfying to me, since it resorts to me watching the character do cool stuff while I just hold the button down and maybe move the joystick a little bit. There's something to be said for that mechanical feedback of pressing a button and seeing a singular action take place. I barely used magic because I never felt a desire to most of the time. It's transformed into this consumable system that for some reason has friendly fire, and the charm and beauty of the materia and magic systems of old just isn't there. Now, having said that, when the game is just 4 boys who listen to Breaking Benjamin or My Chemical Romance or Linkin Park, and it's just those 4 boys go on a road trip bachelor party, it becomes one of my favorite Final Fantasies. Those 4 boys are some of my favorite characters, and their interactions are just amazing. The camping scenes are hilariously wholesome. They all have good synergy with each other. They all bounce off each other, and they just make this one interesting group dynamic that's just fun to be around. They joke, they banter, they care for each other, they fight for each other. And while the combat has some deep-seated issues, and look, maybe it was just my teenage brain at the time, but warping to the sword will never not be the coolest thing to me. It's super satisfying. It really is. Especially when you go to those warp points around the battle area, and then you warp down onto the enemy. It's fun. It's just stupid, dumb fun, and I'm fine with that. And then you have fishing, which for some reason felt oddly fun and rewarding. And I almost always was down for a bit of fishing and actually cared about upgrading my rod and getting different bait. Heck, I treated the game like a fishing game for some of the time. Like a non-insignificant chunk of my game time when it comes to Final Fantasy XV was just spent fishing. It got to the point where they announced a spin-off fishing game, where there was maybe a 5-minute window when I was actually considering to get it. That would never have happened with any other game for me. Seriously, the fishing had no right to be that fun. And the ending is one of my favorites ever. Look, I know, I get it, right? I just went on about how the plot is god-awful. Why would I like the ending to a plot that wasn't good, or at least wasn't well told? It's a very simple answer, actually, because it focused on the 4 boys, and they were who I cared about for Final Fantasy XV. Sure, 15 had its faults, many faults even, and those faults were in really important places. But just exploring the world, taking it slow, doing what I wanted while zipping around with my warp sword, doing side quests, and having the story with the squad fleshed out, made it a pretty dang good experience for me, and helped get me into Final Fantasy to begin with. It was one of my first Final Fantasies, and I'll forever love the game for that. Stand By Me just takes me right back to when I first played the ending, and the game did. If you beat Final Fantasy 15, I won't spoil it, but if you beat the game, and you know when Stand By Me plays, you know that freaking final campfire was also just mean. God, I love this game. We move on to Final Fantasy VII Remake, and again, I love the game unabashedly. I love dang near every aspect of it. I love the combat, the story, the dialogue, the ending, the beginning, the middle, the characters, the cinematography, the progression, the customization, the character models, the artwork, those VR fights you can do. I love the DLC story that we got with Yuffie. I just love it all. And my only real complaint is that it was maybe too linear overall, Like, I get it was trying to emulate how linear the original Midgard section was back in Final Fantasy VII, I get that, but certain sections could have benefited from being more than just a glorified corridor, and I hope that gets rectified in the next game, I really do. Because back in the original Final Fantasy VII, it was a shorter experience, so it didn't bother you all that much, at least for me, when it then pushed you out into this grand open world to explore. Whereas in Final Fantasy VII Remake, it was a 40-hour full-fleshed out game. Outside of that, though, which is a minor complaint for me, I love the game. I love the stuff it adds, for the most part. That crane game section can screw off. I didn't even mind the train graveyard section. With all the ghosts, I didn't mind that. And I love the story for what it is. It took risks, it tried to be different, and I think it succeeded. It's fun, it's wacky, it's heartfelt. It's emotional, and I love it. It's a far more cinematic take on the events of Midgar, but it fleshes them out, especially the cast of characters, and makes Midgar feel more like a city than it did in the original for me. Each section had personality and character. The voice acting added so much emotion to a lot of these scenes. I think it was very well executed. The characters of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse helped round out the cast to make Avalanche feel like a cohesive unit, instead of just 3 jabronis follow Barrett around for a bit to go blow up a reactor. The fallout from the first destroyed reactor, in the original game, they show you a bit of the destruction, but it does kind of brush over it mostly. Whereas in the remake, that is an integral part of the story and for Jessie's character development, where she's blaming herself for the collateral damage, when in actuality it was all Shinra's doing. Which was also an interesting take on that event, just to show the greed and manipulation that Shinra invokes and embodies. It's a game with a strong theme and a strong message, and it conveys that in interesting ways, and in my opinion, with the remake, especially with the Midgar section specifically, the new advancements that it has, in order to tell a story with voice acting, new cinematography, and not just this dated art style, dare I say, like the original Final Fantasy VII, which, let's be honest, has been dated, or is a bit dated. The remake just utilizes the tools that it has at its disposal to tell a great and fun and emotional narrative, while also usurping the expectations of the player, and I really did appreciate that. I have Final Fantasy VII. I love Final Fantasy VII. I'm all on board with a new story. I'm all in favor of that. They have to nail the ending. Don't get me wrong. There's multiple different story threads that the remake has showcased right now that can go horribly wrong in the future. They need to nail the ending, because the ending will recontextualize the story events of the remake, but so far, for what it is, I love Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then, soon to be, later this year, we'll have Final Fantasy XVI, headed up by Yoshi P, who also heads up Final Fantasy XIV. The combat is headed up by Ryota Suzuki, who I believe helped out with Devil May Cry. And Soken is on the soundtrack, who also heads up the Final Fantasy XIV soundtrack. It's a combination of people who make things that appeal to me. And while I haven't played DMC 5 yet, I have played a bit of DMC 1, so I kind of know what it's all about a little bit. And from what I've seen of it, it's right up my alley. And 16 appears to be up my alley as well. I love the idea of the various icons giving you different abilities and different strengths and weaknesses, and balancing them out while swapping between them to do various combos or to counter various enemies. The progression seems like a fun iteration on the core system from Final Fantasy VII Remake. We haven't seen enough of Clive yet. He just kind of feels like, I'm on a revenge tour, I need to see more of him. But again, I don't have a reason to doubt them, because I trust the people who are heading up this game. And obviously it isn't out yet, and everything is subject to change. But the current trajectory of 16 looks very appealing to me. The aesthetics look nice and diverse. It's a darker take for sure, and that won't vibe with everyone. But Clive looks interesting enough to me. I like the return to high fantasy concepts for Final Fantasy. The combat looks fast and fluid and combo heavy, and that appeals to me when it comes to a real-time action RPG. The music already sounds grandiose and epic and just feels like Soken's soundtrack. That choir they had in the trailers though, it just hit different. I'm excited and I'm optimistic. An M-rated Final Fantasy could be a really compelling experience, as they are possibly able to explore themes with storytelling styles that were just unavailable to them before due to the age rating. That underground crystal city that was in the third trailer, I believe, God, that looked pretty. The desert sands, the forest zones, the giant icon battles just look cool. Final Fantasy XVI, if I had to just sum it up in one word, looks cool. And I'm optimistic about it. So do I think modern Final Fantasy has some issues? Yeah, sure. You can make an argument that it may be a bit too cinematic, but even then, I'll be honest with you, I enjoy the gameplay. It's a different style from the older games, and like I said in that earlier video that I mentioned before, when I made a video an argument for turn-based Final Fantasies, I still love that old style of game as well. I don't want to see it go the way of the dodo. I would love to see some world out there where we could have both of these styles for Final Fantasy games. Yeah, Square Enix has a bunch of spin-off series that are turn-based RPGs. Yeah, sure they do. But to me, they never felt like those original Final Fantasies. And I don't feel that that style of game should disappear. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying, though, is that I enjoy both of these styles. And I think they both have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. And this video was me talking about what I think the strengths of this new style are. It's very cinematic, the storytelling, in my opinion. At least it resonates more with me. I can't say how it resonates with you, because we all have different opinions and our own perspectives. But for me, I enjoy the overall package of modern-day Final Fantasy. So I'm going to call the video there for today. Thank you for tuning in. My pleasure checking the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload in the future. And leave a comment down below with your favorite Final Fantasy and why. I want to hear your story. Your story with when you first played your favorite Final Fantasy. What did you think? What did you feel? How was it? I'd love to hear your stories. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. As always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.